Isaiah are a hinge that holds the two halves of the book together. So we're at halfway point in our study. And as a matter of fact, these chapters are not in chronological order of their happening. And it's going to get a little weird. But what we're going to look at tonight, the order of events that we'll study tonight, here's the order of the way things happened, but this is not the order of the chapter numbers. Chapter 38 takes place. Then chapter 36 takes place. And then chapter 37 takes place. So it's not 36, 37, 38. It's not in chronological order. And when we read this, it'll make sense to you, but it might not right now. Now, we've walked through this part so far. Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, the bad, bad man. He destroyed 46 cities in Judah. Now, Judah is southern Israel. Israel was northern Israel. They split over a family squabble, and so you've got the 2.5 tribes down south, and you've got 9.5 tribes up north. And the 46 cities down south that Sennacherib destroyed, it was a defensive ring around Jerusalem. Is why they were built where they were built. And so Sennacherib systematically destroys all 46 of these cities. So he takes away the defensive ring. Now, Jerusalem is all by itself. And that's the next prize that Sennacherib is eyeing with these outer defenses destroyed. And so the siege takes place. He never took it, but the siege, the circle, they did surround it and tried to cut it off, took place in the year 701 BC. And the events in chapter 38 take place before the events in chapters 36 and 37. And chapter 38 opens in a roughly, some of these dates are kind of hard to nail down, but we think it's around 704 to 703 BC, approximately 1 to 2 years before Sennacherib even arrives, okay? So what we're reading now is before Sennacherib gets there, even though we've already read about Sennacherib's situation in 36 and 37. So look in verse 1, chapter 38. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And Isaiah, the prophet, the son of Amoz, came unto him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Bad news. Here was a king. He was 39 years old. He has been on the throne for 14 years. Very young man. He came to the throne when he was 25. He has no heir, no son. He's going to die. What's going to happen to his family? What's going to happen to the kingdom? Word is they're going to be attacked by Sennacherib. That's the word on the street, because that hadn't happened yet. And so he's somewhat concerned, number one, about his life. Nobody wants to die. He has no heir that's going to take the place of him when he does die. Who's going to lead the kingdom? If he dies now and Sennacherib is out there, what's going to happen to everything? And so he's somewhat concerned. And he turns his face to the wall, which was a sign of Oriental privacy. And so their beds were like cots attached to the wall. They didn't have beds out in the middle of the floor like we do. And so he was on his bed, and he rolls his face to the wall, and he's praying. And here's what he prays in verse number 3. Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth, and have with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. All right, he's squalling like a youngin'. He reminds the Lord, which he didn't have to do, but this was what he did. Lord, I've been a good man. I've honored you. I've walked with you. I've done all of these things. And before Hezekiah leaves the room, don't you wish every prayer was answered this quickly? Before Hezekiah leaves the room, look what happens now in verse number 4. Then came the word of the Lord to Isaiah, saying, Go and say to Hezekiah, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will add unto thy days 15 years. So he's going to get to live an additional 15 years. Now, keep this in mind. This was both a good thing and a bad thing. 3 years after this event, he has a little boy. And that little boy's name was Manasseh. Manasseh grew up to be, of course, the next king, and he became the king of Judah at the age of 12. He's 12 years old. He was a wicked little cuss, all right? He ruled for 55 years, and quite possibly was one of the most wicked kings that Judah ever had. So had Isaiah died, Manasseh would have never been born. Manasseh would have never ruined Judah for these 55 years. Well, he has a little boy by the name of Ammon. Ammon comes to the throne, he rules for a little while, and he gets himself assassinated. He got suicided. Somebody suicided him. And so he's out of the picture. He had a son by the name of Josiah. And Josiah began to reign, and he reigned in Judah from 641 to 609, quite possibly one of the most godly kings that ever ruled in Judah. He was the one that he landscaped a return to biblical worship. And so when I say that it was a good thing and a bad thing, Manasseh was a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it was Manasseh that gave the order to have Isaiah cut in half. He had him sawn into two pieces. And so, when you pray, keep in mind, God may answer that prayer, and there may be some collateral issues involved in that you didn't count on. And so, verse number 6, now this is a prophecy because it hasn't happened yet, but we've already read about it in chapters 36 and 37. Look at verse number 6. I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city. And this shall be a sign unto thee from the Lord, that the Lord will do this thing that he hath spoken. Now, the Lord is going to give him a token. And this is going to be kind of unusual, what he's going to do, but here's what he does. In the plaza of the palace, there was this, like a playground, okay? There was a westward-facing set of steps. And the sun, when it came over the walls of the city, would hit these steps, and it acted like a sundial. Now, this was not the sundial that we see today, the round face with the numbers on it, and you got the little metal thing. That's not what this was. This was a set of steps. And you could tell time as the shadow of the sun hit each of these steps, and you could tell what time it was. And they did. So look at verse number 7. And this shall be a sign unto thee from the Lord, that the Lord will do this thing that he hath spoken. I will defend the city. And what do we normally want? When somebody promises you something, well, in the banking industry, can I borrow $50,000? What do they want? They want some collateral. They want proof you don't need it, basically, is what the deal is. And so Isaiah didn't even ask for this, but the Lord said, I'm going to give you some collateral. Here's going to be proof that I'm going to defend this city because Sennacherib is coming. Hadn't gotten there yet. So, behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz. Ahaz was the guy that built these steps. 10 degrees backward, so the sun returned 10 degrees by the sun. So the sun returned 10 degrees by which degrees it was gone down. Now look at 2 Kings chapter 20. 2 Kings chapter 20. If I can get there. Verse 8. Now, Isaiah did get sick, by the way. When the Lord said you're going to die, he came down with something. We don't know what it was. We do know this, that a lump of figs was put on the boil, and I don't know if it drew infection out. We don't know because the Bible just says this is what happened. Doesn't tell how it happened. But look at verse 7 now. Isaiah said, take a lump of figs, and they took and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. So the Lord spared his life. And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, what shall be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and that I shall go up into the house of the Lord the third day? So he is deadly sick, In 3 days, he's going to go to church. All right? Isaiah said, this sign shalt thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he hath spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees or back 10 degrees? He gave him an option. So you want it to be 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock? Well, what do you want to happen here? The Lord's leaving this up to you. You want it to advance or proceed? It's daylight savings time or the other, all right? Hezekiah answers, it's a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. Nay, but let the shadow return backward. I'm not sure why it would be a light thing for it to advance, but anyway, he thought it would be the harder thing to back the time up. So he says, let's back it up. Isaiah the prophet cried unto the Lord, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backward by which it had gone down in the dial of Ahaz. Now, keep this in mind. This was not a universal event. The Lord did not stop the earth and back the earth up. That's not what happened. This happened, you know where it happened? In the playground. On those steps, the shadow of the sun backed up 10 degrees. And so Hezekiah and Isaiah could see this from the window where he was. And so verse number 9 says, the writing of Hezekiah, king of Judah, when he had been sick and was recovered of his sickness. Beginning of verse number 10 is a poem. And if you had had something like this happen to you, would you want to journal it? Want to write about it? Okay, he's going to write a psalm here. And what we're going to see, verses 9 through 14 are his state of mind before he got healed. And you're going to hear him moaning and crying. I mean, it's bad. Then in verses 15 through 20, the Lord healed him, and you're going to hear a completely different tone of voice. I mean, it's going to be very obvious. So look at verse 9. The writing of Hezekiah, king of Judah, when he had been sick and was recovered of his sickness. So that's the theme here. I said in the cutting off of my days, I shall go to the gates of the grave. I am deprived of the residue. And the word residue means prime. So the prime years of I'm not even going to live to be in my prime. I said, I shall not see the Lord, even the Lord in the land of the living. I shall behold man no more with the inhabitants of the world. I'm leaving life. I'm not going to see you guys anymore. I'm not going to be able to go to the temple. I will not be able to worship the Lord here in the physical world anymore. Mine age is departed and is removed from me as a shepherd's tent. Now, he's going to give us some illustrations of how uncertain life is. And I need to keep this in mind. It's like a Bedouin tent. And these guys didn't live in permanent housing like we do. They had a tent. If anybody's been camping here, you don't normally live in a tent. You pitch it and you take it down, you move somewhere else, you come back to the house. And so he says, my life is kind of like that, very mobile, very quickly taken down. I have cut off like a weaver my life. He will cut me off with pining sickness. From day even to night wilt thou make an end of me. They would weave cloth. And they had these two big horizontal sticks, big stick up here, big stick down here, and they had strings here, and they would put they would start laying the strings in there vertically, and they would make cloth out of it, and when you got it as long as you wanted it, you'd whack it off at the bottom and roll it up. And so the illustration is, life is kind of like that. Your life is like a piece of cloth. How long are we going to be on the loom? We don't have a clue. See, God's in charge of this. Some lives are not very long at all. Some lives are, Sister Charlotte, 90 years old, that's a lot of years to live, and so her life has been extended, but others don't have that privilege. God finishes them at an earlier time, and so he says, I reckon, he's going to give another example. I reckoned it till morning that as a lion, so he will break all my bones. From day even to night will thou make an end of me. So now he said, my life is kind of like being stalked by a lion. And he's going to catch me. And apparently he's going to catch me tonight because he thought he was going to die. And so he illustrates this thing as, this wild animal is going to just tear him to pieces. And he says, verse 14 now, like a crane or a swallow, so did I chatter. Have you heard, now that's not what this animal is, but have you heard a sandhill crane? And the crazy, can anybody in here do that? something like that, and it's just this chirping, kind of a chattering sound. And he says, that's kind of the way I felt. I did mourn as a dove. So he's crying, all right? So his crying is Oriental, and Orientals cry differently than we do. It's very, very verbal, very animated, so he's doing all that on his bed. And mine eyes fail with looking upward. Oh, Lord, I'm oppressed. Undertake for me. I'm done. You ever felt that way, by the way? Have you ever thought you were going to die? You've been so close that maybe you prayed a prayer like this. Well, look at verse 15. Something happened between 14 and 15. And what happens is Jehovah Rapha heard his prayer, saw his tears, and said, no, you're not going to die. And he reverses. What shall I say? He hath both spoken unto me, and himself hath done it. I shall go softly all my years in the bitterness of my soul. Now, going softly all my years means I'm going to behave my stupid self from now on. I'm going to humble myself before the Lord. I mean, look what he's done for me. I mean, how else would you respond? You know, God heard your prayer. He saved your life. He spared you. That should humble us. And so he says, for the rest of my life. Now, he did not keep his word. All right? We'll find out in just a little bit that he blew it, did a real big piece of stupid, and we'll get to that in a minute. Verse 16, O Lord, by these things men live, and in all these things is the life of my spirit. So wilt thou recover me and make me to live. So now he's celebrating. He is just absolutely out of his mind. Behold, for peace I had great bitterness, but thou hast I love this, in love to my soul, delivered it from the pit of corruption, for thou hast called all my sins behind my back. So he's got this understanding. God's healed me. And the reason he healed me is because he has forgiven my sin. And this is a sign that we're right with each other. Verse 18, for the grave cannot praise thee. Death cannot celebrate thee. They that go down into the pit cannot hope for thy truth. Now he's not saying here, and this has been kind of a controversial narrative for a long time with commentators. Did he not believe that God was beyond the grave? And the answer is, that's not what he's saying here. What he's saying is, I will not be able to do this in the land of the living anymore. All right? I'm going to another place, and this is what he thought, he was going to die. And so, verse 20, the Lord was ready to save me. Therefore we will sing my songs to the stringed instruments all the days of our life in the house of the Lord. This fired this guy up. Would it you? You just get a death sentence, and then that death sentence is rescinded, and you are completely healed, and you start writing songs, and you pick up your guitar, and you run to the temple, and you're singing these songs for everybody to hear you. Verse number 21, for Isaiah had said, let them take a lump of figs and lay it for a plaster upon the boil, and he shall recover. I've never read anything that metabolically accurately describes this boil. What would that be that would be so deadly and so fatal that it was going to kill you? Was it cancer? The only thing that I can think of, it was some sort of an aggressive, fast-moving cancer. And now what do figs do to cancer? I don't have a clue. It might have been contemporary medical treatment. We don't know. All we know is Hezekiah also had said, what's the sign that I go up in the house of the Lord? How do I know this is going to happen? Well, we know. The Lord said, all right, look out your window. You see those steps over there? What do you want? You want the time to go forward? You want time to go backward? I can do either one. No problem. Me, what do you want? And he says, well, it'd be an easy thing for it to go forward. And so he says, it was just back time up. And he did. And so that was the sign that, number one, Hezekiah was going to live. Number two, Sennacherib might as well go to the house now because he's not going to get over the walls. As a matter of fact, the Lord even said he won't even shoot an arrow over the wall. An arrow won't even come into this city. And so the Lord's got this thing handled. Everything is taken care of. And so this encounter with God has taught this man 5 lessons that I think every one of us ought to learn. All right, number 1, he was humbled for life. At least that was his statement. If God does, and he does every day, should we not live in a state of absolute humility before God? Arrogance it's an odd disease, pride is, because it makes everybody sick except the person who has it. And you see people just so proud of their looks, proud of what they have, proud of what they own. I mean, you see it plastered all over Facebook, Snapchat, whatever. You know, you see people, they got the duck lips going on, and you know what they want people to say. Oh, honey, you're gorgeous. You know that's what they're baiting you. They're fishing. They want all these compliments. And I see the guys, they're doing all this kind of stuff. And if you ever send me a picture of you doing that, I'm going to laugh at you, all right? Because I do it at the house, These folks that think they are so appealing, it makes me laugh out loud. And so arrogance is just a disgusting attribute in a human being. Everything good that's in our life, might I ask you, who delivered it to you? The Lord did. I have nothing to be boastful about or prideful about at all. And so anyway, now, all this stuff has happened. Well, number 2, let me give you the others. The second lesson was God's words have life-giving authority. He learned that. Folks, I don't know how God does this, but I do know that he could stop the earth from spinning with a thought. I do know that he could blow the sun up with a thought. I do know that there's enough atomic power in this building to blow up this planet. I do know that. Everything's made out of atoms, correct? How many did we split to blow up Hiroshima? 1 atom. 1. 80,000 people gone. How many atoms you think are in this building? The Bible says that all things consist by his word. And the word consist means are glued together. You know who has glued together the nucleus of an atom and held it together to keep it from flying apart to create absolute devastation in the universe? You know who did that? God has done that. And all he'd have to do, and one day he's going to do this, he's going to speak release to these atoms, and the elements are going to melt with a fervent heat. But it's incredible when God speaks. Can he heal Chelsea? Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. Any kind of disease, he's already paid for. He died to pay for that. And so, let's get back to verse number 3 here. He realizes his total dependence on God. That's in chapter 38, verse 16. He had a greater appreciation for God's grace in verse number 17. I think we take God's grace for granted. We live life. We're Americans. We're blessed. We used to have toilet paper. I don't know, any toilet paper left in the country anymore? I don't know. We've been saved by his grace. You know what grace is? We use a lot of terms that we don't necessarily understand, I think. It is, in Paul's writings, he says, well, let's just turn. Let's take a minute to do this. Look at Philippians chapter 2 and verse number 13. Pretty incredible. Philippians 2:13. Paul says, for it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. That is the biblical definition of grace. All right, now let's look at it for just a second. It is God which worketh. All right, we don't say worketh. We're not Victorian Europeans. The word worketh means to energize. Somebody came in the building tonight, they turned the lights on. What did they do? They energized the filament with electricity. Boom, we got light. And so it means to energize. So it is God that energizes you to do 2 things. Without God energizing this, you would not do these 2 things. All right? So look at the first thing. Both to will. Who gives you the energy and the desire to want to live in harmony with God and His Word? Who does that? God does. We got saved. Well, I didn't get saved because I wanted to. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, I think I'm going to get saved. I'm going to confess myself a sinner before God and call on the name of the Lord. I'm going to get saved today. Human beings don't do that. Grace brings you to want to do that. All right, now look, well, I can't. I don't have the ability to do that. Exactly. Look at the next thing. He gives you the energy both to will and to do of His good pleasure. So not only does God give you the desire, He gives you the ability. So then what is the definition of grace? It's the dynamic life of Christ in me that gives me the desire and the ability to live in harmony with God and His Word. When you fail of the grace of God, that doesn't mean you lose your salvation. That means you do what you want to do. Okay? Which is a horrible thing to want to do. But let's get to verse number 139. Now, at that time, Merodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon. Now we've got another country involved here. All right? We had Assyria, and we've got Babylon now. And this Merodach-Baladan, the name Merodach is the word Marduk. And Marduk was the chief god of Babylon. And kings often named themselves, they were so proud of themselves, they'd name themselves after gods. You know who named Alexander the Great? Alexander, yeah. He was just Al before all that happened, and then all of a sudden he gets famous and he's Alexander the Great. So he named himself. And so here's Merodach-Baladan. He was king of Babylon from 721 to 710. He was king again from 704 to 703. 9 months in those years, in 704 to 703. And so he hears. Now these guys, by the way, were sun worshipers. What has just happened in Babylon or in Jerusalem? Something really kinky about the sun backing up. Don't you think that kind of word doesn't spread? So also he's heard 185,000 Assyrian soldiers got killed one night. He's heard about it. That's already happened here. I understand that you were sick and were dying, and they threw some figs on you, and you went to church 3 days later, and they got intrigued by all this. So Merodach-Baladan, who was the king of Babylon, sent some ambassadors to Jerusalem. Now understand that he didn't do this just to be nice. He was scoping the place out. He also wanted to sign them on as some helpers against Assyria. And so this is not, isn't that nice? That's not what this is. That's what it looks like. All right, so look at verse number 1 now. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he'd heard he'd been sick and was recovered. So he goes to Walmart and gets him a nice get-well card. Isn't that sweet? That is just really a nice thing to do. And so Hezekiah was glad of them and showed them the house of his precious things. Now keep in mind, Hezekiah has been deceived. He thinks they're there because they like him. They're taking notes, folks, for future reference, if you catch my meaning. Because in 150 years, guess what's going to happen? Nebuchadnezzar is going to come, and he's going to crush this city. He's going to do it 3 times. As a matter of fact, in 586 will be the final blow. They will destroy the temple. And so, but this guy, hey, guys, man, thank y'all for coming. For me, you got roses for me. Thank you. I just put them over there on the table. Hey, y'all want to see something? And these Babylonians are like, yeah, we want to see something. Come on in here. Takes them in the kitchen. Shows them all the spices, all of the oils, these precious, expensive oil. Well, let's just read it. So he showed them the house of the precious things, the silver, the gold, the spices, the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor. So he takes him down to the base and shows all the military equipment. This is what we got. This is how we're going to kill people. This is how we defend ourselves. And all that was found in his treasures, there was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. He just opened it all. And, well, that was going to come back to bite him. And so the prophet shows up. Isaiah walks in and he says, hey, where are these guys from? Oh, they're from Babylon. Really? What do they want? They just want to come and congratulate me and just be good guys, good neighbors. And they brought me a card and some flowers. And, well, look at verse 3. Then came Isaiah, the prophet, unto King Hezekiah, and said unto him, what said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, they are come from a far country unto me. That's about the first truthful thing he's going to say here. It was 900 miles. These guys had been traveling for months and months and months. And so they come from a far country, even from Babylon. Then said he, well, what have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, all is in my house have they seen. There is nothing. He's bragging about this. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. Oh, then Isaiah says, Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days come. The days are going to come. Now, it's going to be 120 years in the future, but they're going to come. That all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. Nothing. And you know what happened in 586? Nebuchadnezzar came. He said, look, I've tried to play nice with you guys, but y'all keep rebelling and da-da-da, so we're through. We're done with you. They kick the doors down. They tear the walls down. They loot the temple, which was probably the wealthiest piece of real estate on the earth, full of gold and just, there's no telling what was in there because it was the city hall. This is where the genealogical records were kept of all the Jewish tribes. Well, they got burned. That's why the Jews don't know where they're from today. Jesus is the only one that knows what tribe he's from. So they strip everything. They take the electrical plugs, they take the light, everything. They just strip it down. Then they burn it. They burn everything. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away. And they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Now, this is where Hezekiah is, see, what's that Hebrew word? Stupid. Yeah, that's the word. Can you pronounce that? Then said Hezekiah, good. Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken unto me. Moreover, there be peace and truth in my days. 120 years, that's a long way down the road, bud. I've got it, I'm in pretty good shape here for the rest of my life. Here's a lesson. Number one, don't brag about what you have. Be very cautious about talking about what you have. How many people, let's go back to this social media thing. Don't put pictures of stuff online that you don't want stolen. I see people put stuff online. I got a brand new AR-15. Okay. Be careful about that. I know personally of people who have gotten involved in conversations and given people their home address. And I'm like, I don't know what you're taking to be so dumb, but it's working really well. Don't do that. And so here these guys have seen it all. So what do you think a Babylonian is going to do when he sees that kind of capital and those kinds of assets? Don't you think they didn't write that down, all right? And so they did. And he falters in his commitment. Now I want to read something too. Look in 2 Chronicles chapter 32. 2 Chronicles 32. This is the parallel story of what we've just read in the book of Isaiah, but it's got a little more detail, all right? Look at verse 24. Now this is prior to the siege by Assyria. That hadn't happened yet. In those days, Hezekiah was sick unto death, or sick to the death, and prayed unto the Lord, and he spake unto him and gave him a sign. But Hezekiah rendered not again to the benefit done unto him, for his heart was lifted up. Therefore was wrath upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem. So can the attitude of one person affect a whole lot of people? Here was one guy. I'm just one guy. You only need one guy. Verse 26, notwithstanding, Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord came not upon them in the days of Hezekiah. This was the 185,000 Assyrian soldiers get killed. But what drew Sennacherib to surround the city in the first place and destroy 46 defensive cities of Judah? What caused that in the first place? Apparently, Hezekiah, he was a good and godly man most of the time. Not all the time. All right? Verse 27. Hezekiah had exceeding much riches and honor, and he made himself treasuries for silver and for gold and for precious stones and for spices and for shields and for all manner of pleasant jewels. This guy was a multi-gazillionaire. And he was dumb enough to open the bank and show all of it to these Babylonian marauders. Should have never done that. Storehouses also for the increase of corn and wine and oil, and stalls for all manner of beasts, and coats like little stone pens for flocks. Moreover, he provided him cities and possessions of flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him substance very much. Now this same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon. Now there's a spring that is still there in Jerusalem, and it's called the Gihon Spring. And he brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all of his works. Now, here's what, there was a water tunnel. It's underground. And they built this thing. They got men working on the top end and men working on the bottom end. And this is rock, okay? And they started from opposite ends. They were 1,770 feet apart. And they're working through this rock. And the way they found out where to carve so they wouldn't miss each other, they'd holler. And as they hollered, when they finally broke that final dividing, they were right on the money. And so they built this underground tunnel from the Gihon Spring. Why would he do that? Well, if you're under siege, what do you have to have? You got to have water, exactly. And so they had storehouses of food, and they had this water supply. So, I mean, you couldn't starve them out or thirst them to death. And so the tank that this tunnel led to, there was a tank that was kind of like a reservoir or a cistern. This thing was 240 feet long and 150 feet wide. It held a lot of water. I've seen it. It's huge. It's still there. It's a tourist attraction even today. And it's called the Tunnel of Hezekiah. And, I mean, this guy was tremendously gifted. God gave him money, gave him fistfuls of money, gave him all of the things that we're reading about here. However, look at verse 31. Howbeit, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land? God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. So here's kind of an odd statement, isn't it? But here's what happened. These ambassadors come, and the Lord just simply says, okay, I've blessed him. I've healed him. I've given him money, gold, silver, flocks. He's one of the most famous men in the world. I have done nothing but bless him. Let's just see what he does. And the Lord just sat back. And what does he do? The first opportunity that he has. You know what he could have said to these Babylonian ambassadors? What should he have said, you think? God has been so good to me, guys, I cannot even show it to you. He has blessed us, man, and you need to come to know the God that we work. You know, he could have done that, but he didn't do that. And so in this business of these ambassadors that came down here, he absolutely blew that. Now, the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his goodness, behold, they are written in the vision of Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the chiefest of the sepulchres of the sons of David. And all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did honor him at his death, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. And Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, but did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, like unto the abominations of the heathen whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. So here we go, right back in this cycle of absolute wicked, evil Satanism, basically is what it was. And so God has blessed us, folks. His grace has washed over us. We're probably, everybody in this room tonight, let me change that. Everybody in this room tonight is alive because of the grace of God. We're alive because God wants us alive. Now, why would God want us alive? To throw our lives away? To ruin ourselves? To ruin other people? He has graced us for the purpose of doing what Hezekiah had a chance to do, but failed to do. Just reveal the glory of God. There's not a person in here that God's not been good to. Nobody. Nobody. And people need to know that. See, you have a circle of influence that I don't have. You know people I don't know. You're going to go places tomorrow that I'm not going to go. I'm going to go places you're not going to go. So I just want to encourage you, wherever you go, be what God wants you to be in that situation. Let him energize you to will and to do, to will and to do. And when that happens in your life, you will find that your prayer life will become more powerful. Your trust in the Lord will become authentic. It won't just be something that you sit in the church building and hear me yammer for an hour. It will be so real and authentic to you. And it's the difference between looking at the menu and having them bring the steak. You ever been in a restaurant where the hamburgers, they took and the hamburger was like that, and then they bring you the hamburger, and it looks like the cook sat on it, you know? And I'm like, what happened to the picture? What in the world is this about? God doesn't do that. God doesn't do that. And I'm grateful that we have a God that's good to us. Yes, sir. Right.
And they built some wrought iron barrels down the wall and reenacted how those Assyrian soldiers, they had this wall that they set behind, and they shot these arrows over it and moved the wall up the mountain, and they took it. Very interesting.
They were good at being bad. Yeah. That's pretty cool. All right, y'all ready for some ice cream? Can you guys stay for some ice cream? You want some ice cream? Bob, you want some ice cream? Okay. No, please, come on. No, I thought that'd be a harder sell than that, but that wasn't a hard sell at all. All right, Well, let's pray and come on back. And we don't get to spend a whole lot of time together through the week, so let's do that tonight. And we're about 10 minutes early getting out, so you eat 10 minutes worth of ice cream. Lord, thank you for your goodness. We're so grateful for your grace. Nothing is random. Nothing is out of control. And I want to thank you for it, and I pray that you bless every heart that is in this building tonight. May we just fall in love with you. And may everywhere we go and everything we do, and every word we say, every thought we think, be in accord with your purpose for our lives. Thank you for the book of Isaiah. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, let's go.